The first thing Captain Olivia Martinez noticed wasn't the alarm sit, was the silence that came just before them. For exactly 3 heartbeats, Mining Station Alpha 7 fell into an eerie quiet that made her skin crawl. Then all hell broke. Loose. The emergency klaxons erupted like banshees, their ear-splitting wails bouncing off every metal surface in the cramped command center. Blood-red warning lights strobed frantically, casting everything in a hellish crimson glow that made shadows dance like demons on the walls. Olivia's heart slammed against her ribs so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Emma, status report." The words tore from her mouth before her brain caught up. Fear turning her usually calm voice into something sharp and desperate. Emma Thompson, her communications officer and closest friend for the past 3 years, looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her normally steady hands trembled as they flew across her console, fingers dancing over holographic displays that flickered with increasingly dire warnings. The 28-year-old had joined the mining crew fresh out of the academy, all bright smiles and endless optimism. Right now, she looked like a terrified child. "Captain, we've lost all contact with sections 7 through 12. Emma's voice cracked like thin ice. "The automated systems are reporting multiple hull breaches, catastrophic decompression in the lower decks." And she paused, her face going from pale to absolutely white. "And something about confirmed hostile alien contact." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. Hostile alien contact. In 3 years of deep space mining operations, the most dangerous thing they'd encountered was a solar flare that knocked out their communications for 6 hours. Their biggest worry was usually whether the coffee synthesizer would break down again. Now their sensors were painting a picture that belonged in a nightmare. "That's impossible," she whispered, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't. The evidence was right there on the screens around them, energy signatures unlike anything in their databases, moving with purpose and speed that defied conventional physics. You know that feeling when you're driving down a familiar road and suddenly realize you've taken a wrong turn into a neighborhood you've never seen before? That's exactly what this felt like, except instead of being lost in suburbia, they were potentially facing humanity's first contact with an alien species, and based on the damage reports streaming in, these weren't the friendly, peaceful explorers from the HOLOVIDS, Liam Rodriguez, their tactical officer, though what used tactics were on a mining station. Olivia had always wondered, looked up from his console with the expression of a man watching his own execution. "Captain, long-range sensors are picking up multiple vessels approaching our position. They're moving fast, and I mean really fast. Estimated time to arrival." He swallowed hard. 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Olivia's mind raced, calculating options that all seemed to end in disaster. They had no weapons beyond mining lasers, no shields worth mentioning, and a crew of 43 civilians whose combat training consisted of a 3-hour safety course on handling explosive decompression. "How many vessels?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "I'm reading, Jesus, Captain, I'm reading at least 12 distinct signatures. Each one is massive, bigger than anything in our registry, and they're not responding to any of our hails." The irony wasn't lost on her. Here they were, representatives of a species that had spent centuries wondering if they were alone in the universe. And when they finally got their answer, it came with weapons blazing. Murphy's Law had a twisted sense of humor. "Liam, get me a fleet-wide emergency broadcast. Priority Alpha. Now." The order came out harder than she intended, but there was no time for pleasantries. Every second they delayed was another second closer to whatever these unknown attackers had planned. Liam's hands shook as he activated the transmission array, his usually precise movements clumsy with fear. "Channel open, Captain. Broadcasting. On all emergency frequencies." Olivia took a deep breath, knowing that the next words out of her mouth would either save them or seal their doom. The weight of 43 lives pressed down on her shoulders like a mountain. When she spoke, she projected every ounce of authority and desperation she could muster. "This is Captain Martinez of Mining Station Alpha 7. To any friendly forces. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Repeat, we have confirmed alien contact and are taking heavy casualties. Multiple hull breaches reported. Station integrity compromised. Requesting immediate military assistance. Code Black Emergency. Any available forces, please respond." The message shot out through hyperspace at faster-than-light speeds, riding the quantum communication networks that connected dozens of human colonies across this sector of the galaxy. Within seconds, it would reach every military installation, every patrol ship, every defense platform within 50 light-years. Someone would hear them. Someone had to. But what Olivia didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that her desperate plea for help was about to trigger the most significant moment in galactic history. Her message didn't just reach human colonies. It also reached a small blue-green planet orbiting a yellow star on the very edge of known space. A world whose inhabitants had been monitoring galactic communications for decades, waiting patiently for exactly this moment. On Earth, in the deep, underground command center of Luna Base, Admiral Noah Williams was enjoying what passed for coffee in military rations when the priority alert chimed on his personal communicator. The 60-year-old career soldier had seen 3 wars, 2 alien incursions that turned out to be false alarms, and one very embarrassing incident involving a malfunctioning probe that everyone agreed never to mention again. But this was different. Williams read the translated distress call once, then twice, then a third time to make sure his old eyes weren't playing tricks on him. Then a smile spread across his scarred face, not the kind of smile you'd want to see in a dark alley, but the smile of a predator who'd just caught the scent of prey. "Finally," he growled, his voice carrying the rough edge of a man who'd spent 40 years ordering others into battle. He turned to his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Mason Parker, a young officer who'd never seen real combat, but was about to get a crash course. "Alert the 5th Battle Fleet. Full deployment. Combat ready." Parker's eyes widened. "Sir, the entire 5th Fleet. For a mining station distress call." William's smile grew wider, showing teeth that had seen too many battles. "Son, we've been preparing for this moment for 3 centuries. Humanity just made first contact, and it sounds like someone picked a fight with the wrong species." The Admiral stood, his movements carrying the fluid grace of a man who'd never truly left the battlefield. "Tell the fleet commanders we're going hunting." And Lieutenant Colonel, "Yes, sir. Make sure they understand this isn't a rescue mission anymore. This is a declaration of war." As klaxons began wailing throughout Luna Base, and the most powerful military force in human history began mobilizing for their first interstellar conflict, Captain Olivia Martinez stared at her console displays, watching the countdown timer tick toward 0. 18 minutes had become 15, then 10, then 5, and still no response to their distress call. The silence was more terrifying than any threat could have been. 72 hours. That's how long it took for Captain Olivia Martinez to realize that sometimes getting exactly what you ask for is the worst possible outcome. She hadn't slept since sending that desperate distress call. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of her crew, 43 souls, who trusted her to keep them safe in the vast emptiness of space. For 3 days, they'd huddled together in the station's emergency shelters, jumping at every sound, watching the long-range sensors for any sign of approaching ships. The station's coffee had run out on day 2. By day 3, they were down 2 emergency rations that tasted like cardboard, mixed with regret. But none of that mattered now, because the sensors were finally showing something, and that something was about to change everything they thought they knew about the universe. Captain Emma's voice cut through the artificial quiet of the command center like a whisper in a graveyard. The young communications officer had barely left her post in 72 hours. Dark circles under her eyes making her look like she'd aged a decade. I'm reading multiple contacts on long-range sensors. They're responding to our distress call. Olivia felt her heart skip a beat. Relief flooded through her like warm honey. Help was coming. They were going to be okay. She should have known better than to celebrate too early. How many ships? She asked, moving to stand behind Emma's console. The readings dancing across the holographic display looked wrong somehow. The numbers too large, the energy signatures too powerful. Emma's fingers trembled as she refined the sensor sweep. I'm reading 37 distinct vessels inbound. Captain, these readings don't make sense. According to the sensors, each ship is massive over a kilometer in length. That's bigger than anything in our databases. Double quotes, 30-7 ships. For a simple rescue operation. Olivia frowned. That seemed like overkill, even for a major emergency. You know that feeling when you order a pizza and the entire restaurant staff shows up at your door? This was starting to feel like that, except, instead of extra pepperoni, they were dealing with something that could reshape galactic politics forever. Maybe it's a training exercise, suggested Marcus Webb, their chief engineer, his voice carrying the desperate optimism of a man trying to convince himself the house isn't really on fire. You know, multiple ships working together on rescue protocols. Liam Rodriguez looked up from his tactical console, and the expression on his face killed any hope of this being routine. Captain, I'm analyzing the approaching vessel's configurations. These aren't rescue ships, they're... He paused, running the scans again as if hoping the computer would suddenly announce it was all a massive error. They're warships. Each one is bristling with weapon systems I can't even identify. Energy readings are off the charts. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying the lead vessel in all its terrifying glory. It was a monster kilometer long, beast of black metal and aggressive angles that looked like it had been designed by someone who really didn't like other people. Gun barrels jutted from its hull like the spines of some mechanical porcupine, and strange markings covered its surface in what looked like an alien script. Sweet mother of stars, Liam breathed, his face going white as fresh snow. We called for help against aliens, and something worse answered. Olivia squinted at the markings on the ship's hull. There was something familiar about them, something that tickled the back of her memory. Then the translation software kicked in, and the words appeared in crisp, readable text. UES Vengeance. US that meant United Earth ship. But that was impossible. Earth was a backwater planet on the rim of known space, barely advanced enough for interplanetary travel, let alone building kilometer-long warships that could cross interstellar distances in days, unless everything they thought they knew about Earth was completely wrong. The communication array crackled to life with a sound that made everyone in the command center jump. What came through the speakers was unlike anything Olivia had ever heard, a voice that sounded like it had been forged in the fires of a dozen wars, speaking in harsh guttural tones that their universal translator struggled to process. Mining, Station Alpha 7. This is Admiral Williams of the United Earth Space Navy. We received your distress call regarding hostile alien contact. We are inbound to your position with full battle group deployment. Prepare for immediate fleet operations in your sector. All civilian personnel are to remain in designated safe areas until threat elimination is complete. The words hit the command center like a physical force. United Earth Space Navy. Fleet operations. Threat elimination. Olivia felt her legs turn to jelly, and she had to grab the edge of Emma's console to keep from falling over. This couldn't be happening. Earth wasn't supposed to have a space navy. Earth was supposed to be a peaceful, barely spacefaring civilization that spent most of its time arguing about who got to mine which asteroids. They certainly weren't supposed to have 37 warships capable of crossing half the galaxy in 3 days. Admito Williams. Olivia managed to croak into the comm, her voice sounding like she'd been gargling with gravel. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Negative, Captain Martinez. Our sensors confirm extensive damage to your station consistent with hostile action. Casualty reports indicate significant loss of life. We are prepared to engage any remaining enemy forces. Provide coordinates of hostile vessels for immediate targeting. Oh no, oh no, 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 no. This was going from bad to catastrophic at light speed. Olivia closed her eyes, knowing that the next words out of her mouth were going to make galactic history for all the wrong reasons. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she could already see the history books. First contact, how a mining accident nearly started an interstellar war. Sir, she said, each word feeling like she was pulling teeth. There are no hostiles. Our mining equipment exploded. The damage to the station was it was an accident. We panicked. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any alien attack could have been. It stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Filled with the kind of absolute quiet that makes you wonder if the universe itself has stopped breathing. When Admiral Williams finally spoke again, his voice carried a tone that could have frozen helium. Captain Martinez, are you telling me that the United Earth Space Navy mobilized the 5th Battle Fleet 37 capital ships, 12,000 personnel, and enough firepower to sterilize a small moon because your mining drill broke? Put like that, it sounded even worse. Olivia wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Another pause. Then, incredibly, she heard something that sounded almost like laughter coming through the comm. Well, Admiral Williams said, and now his voice carried a note of dark amusement that was somehow more frightening than his anger had been. This is going to be interesting. On the view screen, the massive warship continued its approach, its weapon systems still active, its intent still unknown, and Olivia realized that their problems were just beginning. Because if Earth could build ships like that, if Earth had a space navy powerful enough to cross the galaxy in days, then everything the galactic community thought they knew about humanity was dead wrong. And judging by the firepower heading their way, being wrong about humans was probably not a mistake. You got to make twice the countdown timer on her console. Showed the fleet's estimated arrival, 4 hours and 37 minutes. In less than 5 hours, 43 civilian miners were going to come face to face with what appeared to be the most powerful military force in known space, and it was all because their equipment had exploded at exactly the wrong moment. Admiral Noah Williams had been in combat for most of his adult life, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Standing on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, surrounded by the most advanced military technology humanity had ever created, he found himself staring at something that defied every assumption he'd held about the universe. The mining station, floating before them, looked like it had been grown rather than built. Its hull curved in smooth, organic lines that reminded him of a seashell or maybe a flower petal caught in the moment of blooming. There were no hard angles, no aggressive protrusions, just elegant sweeps of what appeared to be some kind of bioceramic material that gleamed softly in the starlight. It was beautiful. It was also completely defenseless. Sir, Lieutenant Charlotte Hayes whispered beside him, her voice carrying the kind of reverence usually reserved for churches or graveyards. The young intelligence officer had joined his staff fresh from the academy, full of theories about alien civilizations and first contact protocols. Right now, she looked like someone who'd just realized that all her textbooks were useless. Tactical scans confirm no weapon signatures, no shields, no defensive systems of any kind. Williams felt his jaw clench involuntarily. 20 years of military service had taught him to expect threats from every shadow, to prepare for the worst-case scenario in every situation. He'd mobilized a fifth battle fleet, expecting to face an enemy capable of overwhelming a human outpost. Instead, he was looking at what appeared to be the galactic equivalent of a floating greenhouse. "Whole composition analysis is complete," reported Commander Sarah Mitchell from the science station. "It's definitely bioceramic, but unlike anything in our databases. The molecular structure suggests it was literally grown, not manufactured. These people have technology we've never seen before." Behind Williams, Major James Patterson, a man who'd survived 3 alien incursions and had the scars to prove it, cleared his throat. "Admiral, with respect, are you telling me we brought 37 warships to rescue a bunch of space gardeners?" The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Williams could feel the eyes of his crew on him, waiting for orders that would either make history or start the most embarrassing military incident since someone accidentally declared war on a comet. But before he could respond, the communication array crackled to life again. The voice that came through was so filled with terror that it made Williams' chest tighten with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Genuine concern for someone other than his own people. "Admiral Williams," the alien captain's voice trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. "Please don't hurt us. We didn't know there were others out here. Our equipment failure created false readings on our sensors. When we saw your ships approaching, I thought you were the hostile aliens attacking us." Williams exchanged glances with his senior officers. The woman speaking, Captain Martinez, according to their intercepts of her distress calls, sounded young, frightened, and completely overwhelmed. She also sounded remarkably human, which raised questions he wasn't ready to answer. Major Patterson muttered under his breath. "So we mobilized the entire Fifth Fleet because their space drill broke down and they got scared." The absurdity of the situation was starting to sink in. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. The moment they'd been preparing for since they first looked up at the stars. And it was happening because of a mining accident and a case of mistaken identity. You know that feeling when you show up to a costume party in full medieval armor, only to discover it's actually a quiet dinner party? This was exponentially worse. Williams activated the choosing his words carefully. Every syllable he spoke would be analyzed by historians for centuries to come. "Captain Martinez, I need to understand something. In your original distress call, you mentioned hostile alien contact. What exactly do you know about other species in this galaxy?" The pause that followed stretched on so long that Williams began to wonder if their communication had been cut. When Captain Martinez finally responded, her voice carried a note of confusion that made his blood run cold. "We've been alone out here for so long, Admiral. Our people have been mining this sector for over 50 years, and we've never encountered any signs of intelligent life. When our sensors detected your fleet approaching, we thought you were the hostile aliens, the ones attacking our station." Williams felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. The implications of what she'd just said were staggering. These aliens had been operating under the assumption that they were alone in the universe. And when they finally encountered another spacefaring species, they'd automatically assumed it was hostile. But there was something else in her voice, something that made him pause. The rhythm of her speech, the way she constructed her sentences, even the emotional undertones, it all sounded remarkably familiar, almost human. "Captain," he said slowly, "I have news for you. We are the aliens, and you just discovered that you're not alone in the universe." The sound that came through the system next would haunt Williams' dreams for years to come. It started as a gasp, then escalated into a scream of pure terror that seemed to go on forever. But it wasn't just one voice, it was multiple voices, an entire crew of people who had just realized that their understanding of reality had been turned completely upside down. The screaming was so intense that half his bridge crew winced and took a step back from their consoles. Lieutenant Hayes actually covered her ears, her face pale with shock. "Jesus," Commander Mitchell whispered. "They really didn't know we were out here." Williams felt something twist in his gut that he hadn't experienced since his first combat. Mission 40 years ago, genuine fear. Not fear of the enemy, but fear of what he might have to do next. These weren't warriors or conquerors. They were explorers, maybe even refugees, trying to scratch out a living in the empty spaces between stars. And his arrival had just shattered their entire worldview in the span of a single sentence. The comm crackled again, but this time the voice was different, older, more controlled, though still shaking with barely suppressed panic. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb, Chief Engineer of Mining Station Alpha 7. Admiral, please, you have to understand we're civilians. We don't have weapons. We don't have military training. We're just trying to mine asteroids and survive out here." Williams closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. He'd spent decades preparing for first contact, running scenarios and war games, studying every possible permutation of how humanity might encounter alien life. But none of those scenarios had prepared him for meeting a species that seemed remarkably similar to his own, but had somehow missed the fact that the galaxy was full of other intelligent life. "Dr. Webb," he said carefully, "I'm going to need you and Captain Martinez to prepare for a face-to-face meeting. We have a lot to discuss." The silence that followed was pregnant with possibilities and dangers, because Williams was beginning to suspect that this wasn't just first contact between two different species. The speech patterns, the technology, even the names Martinez, Webb, Thomsonthi were all too familiar. What if these weren't aliens at all? What if they were something far more complicated, far more dangerous to everything humanity thought it knew about itself? The answer to that question was going to change the galaxy forever, and Williams had a sinking feeling that he was about to be the one to deliver it. On the view screen, the organic curves of the mining station seemed to pulse gently in the starlight, like a sleeping creature that might wake up at any moment. And for the first time in his military career, Admiral Noah Williams wasn't sure if he was looking at humanity's greatest opportunity or its greatest threat. The next few hours would determine which one it was. The conference room aboard Mining Station Alpha 7 had never been designed for a meeting that would reshape galactic history. It was a simple space with curved bioceramic walls, soft lighting, and a table that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. Under normal circumstances, it hosted monthly safety briefings and birthday celebrations. Today, it was ground zero for humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien species. Captain Olivia Martinez sat at one end of the table, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Across from her sat a figure that looked like it had stepped out of humanity's darkest military nightmares. Admiral Noah Williams still wore his full combat armor, 2 meters of matte black composite plating that made him look less like a person and more like a walking tank with anger management issues. The armor wasn't just for show. Olivia could see weapon systems integrated into the suit's design, heads-up displays flickering behind the helmet's visor, and what appeared to be enough technology to run a small city. This wasn't protective gear, it was a statement. A very clear, very intimidating statement about what happened to people who threatened Earth's interests. "Let me understand your situation," Williams said, his voice emerging from the armor's speakers with the kind of mechanical distortion that made every word sound like a death sentence. "You're out here alone, with no military protection, mining asteroids with equipment that can explode without warning." The casual way he described their predicament made it sound even worse than it actually was, which, considering they'd just accidentally triggered an interstellar incident, was saying something. "We're peaceful," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of the station's life support systems. "Our people, ... we've never encountered war. Our technology is designed for building, creating, healing. The idea of weapons like yours is. She gestured helplessly at his armor. It's incomprehensible to us. Around the table, her crew sat in various states of terror. Emma Thompson looked like she was trying to shrink into her chair and disappear entirely. Liam Rodriguez kept staring at the Admiral's armor with the fascination of someone watching a natural disaster unfold. Dr. Marcus Webb, their chief engineer, was taking notes on a tablet, though whether he was recording the meeting or writing his last will and testament was unclear. Williams was quiet for a long moment, and the silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of centuries of human conflict. "Captain, let me tell you about Earth." The way he said it made everyone in the room lean forward, despite their fear. There was something in his tone, pride mixed with sadness, triumph, shadowed by loss that demanded attention. Our homeworld has seen over 15,000 wars in recorded history. We've survived ice ages that lasted millennia, asteroid impacts that blacked out the sun for years, supervolcanic eruptions that nearly drove our species to extinction. We've faced plagues that killed half our population, famines that turned neighbor against neighbor, and natural disasters that would have ended most civilizations. Olivia felt her translator working overtime, struggling to process concepts that her people had never needed words for. 15,000 wars. The number was so large it felt meaningless, like trying to count the stars in the sky. And then, Williams continued, after we survived all of that, we invented weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. We built machines that could crack planets like eggs and bombs that could turn suns into black holes. The casual way he described planet-killing weapons made Emma make a small whimpering sound. Dr. Webb's stylus slipped from his fingers and clattered to the table. You survived all that, Olivia managed to ask. How is that even possible? Williams leaned forward in his chair, and even through the armor, she could sense the intensity of his gaze. We survived because we learned to fight back. Every threat that tried to destroy us only made us stronger, more dangerous, more determined to protect what we love. There was something almost admirable about that, Olivia realized. The idea of a species that refused to give up, that turned every challenge into a reason to become more formidable. It was terrifying, but also inspiring. She wasn't sure what to feel anymore. "Captain," Williams said, and now his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. "When we received your distress call, 37 warships responded within 3 days. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. That should tell you something about how seriously we take threats to intelligent life." The implications of that statement hit her like a physical blow. 37 warships, each one capable of destroying her entire station with a single salvo. All of them had crossed interstellar space in 3 days because someone had called for help. The sheer logistics of such a response was staggering, but the motivation behind it was even more remarkable. But Emma, bless her terrified heart, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Are you going to hurt us?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and Olivia felt a surge of protective anger. These were her people, her responsibility. If Admiral Williams wanted to threaten them, he'd have to go through her first. Williams reached up with one armored hand and touched something on his helmet. There was a soft hiss of equalizing pressure, and then he lifted the helmet off entirely. The face that emerged was not what Olivia had expected. Williams was older than she'd thought, probably in his 60s, with steel-gray hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many difficult decisions. There was a scar running from his left temple to his jaw, and his nose had been broken at least once, but his eyes were surprisingly gentle, filled with a warmth that his armor had completely hidden. "No," he said, and his natural voice was rougher than the mechanical distortion had suggested, but infinitely more human. "We're not going to hurt you. The relief that flooded through the room was almost palpable. Emma let out a shaky breath she'd been holding for what felt like hours. Dr. Webb actually smiled for the first time since the crisis began, but Williams wasn't finished. "We're going to protect you," he continued, and now his voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who'd made thousands of life-and-death decisions and lived with the consequences. "Whether you want us to or not." The weight of those words settled over the room like a blanket of steel. Protection, not friendship, not alliance, not negotiation. Protection. The kind that didn't ask permission and didn't take no for an answer. Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature controls. What does that mean, exactly? Williams set his helmet on the table with a soft clink that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "It means that, as of today, your people are under the protection of the United Earth Space Navy. It means that anyone who threatens you, threatens us. And it means that you're about to learn what it feels like to have the most dangerous species in the galaxy watching your back." There was pride in his voice when he said most dangerous species, but also something else. A warning, maybe, or a promise. "But what if we don't want your protection?" Dr. Webb asked quietly. Williams looked at him with something that might have been amusement. "Doctor, you sent a distress call because your mining equipment exploded and you got scared. Your station has no weapons, no shields, and no way to defend itself against anything more dangerous than a solar flare. Whether you want our protection or not is irrelevant. You need it." He stood up, his armor servos whining softly under the load, and looked down at the assembled group of terrified civilians. "The galaxy is full of species that would see your peaceful nature as weakness to be exploited. Your technology, your knowledge, your very existence, all of it, would be prizes to be claimed by anyone with enough firepower to take them." Williams picked up his helmet and tucked it under one arm. "But here's the thing about humans, Captain Martinez. We have a very simple philosophy when it comes to protecting what's ours. You break it, we break you." The silence that followed was pregnant with implications. Outside the conference room's viewports, the massive shapes of the Fifth Battle Fleet hung in space like sleeping predators, their weapons systems still active, their intent still unclear, and Olivia realized that her life, all their lives, had just become infinitely more complicated, because when the most dangerous species in the galaxy decides to protect you, the real question isn't whether you're safe from everyone else. The question is whether you're safe from them. 6 months can change everything. Captain Olivia Martinez had learned that lesson in the most dramatic way possible, standing in what used to be the quiet observation deck of Mining Station Alpha 7. Except it wasn't Mining Station Alpha 7 anymore. It was now the core module of Sanctuary Base, a sprawling complex that dominated the asteroid belt, like a metallic city floating in the void, where once a single vulnerable mining platform had drifted alone among the rocks. Now a massive installation stretched 4 kilometers in every direction. Human engineering had transformed their simple home into something that looked like it belonged in the movie's gleaming corridors, advanced laboratories, and defensive systems that could probably hold off an invasion from 3 different star systems simultaneously. The most striking change wasn't the technology, though. It was the people. Through the reinforced transparent steel windows of the Joint Operations Center, Olivia watched teams of humans and her own people working side by side. A human engineer with cybernetic implants was showing one of her miners how to operate a plasma cutter that could slice through asteroid rock like butter. Near the new hydroponic gardens, a group of children, both human and her species, were playing some kind of anti-gravity tag game that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Captain Emma Thompson approached, and Olivia marveled at the transformation in her young communications officer. Gone was the terrified woman who'd once flinched every time a human spoke. In her place stood someone confident, curious, even excited about the daily interactions with their new allies. The human medical team wants to demonstrate their basic Trauma treatment technology again. Dr. Peterson says they've made some improvements to the regeneration protocols. Olivia had to suppress a laugh. The humans' idea of basic medical technology was like calling a hurricane a light breeze. What they casually referred to as standard field medicine could regrow severed limbs in hours, cure genetic diseases that had plagued her people for generations, and treat injuries that her doctors would have considered death sentences. They're simple. Mining equipment had increased productivity by over 3,000%. Their routine defensive systems could vaporize incoming asteroids the size of small moons. And their elementary educational programs had advanced her people's understanding of physics, chemistry, and engineering by centuries in just 6 months. You know that feeling when you think you're pretty good at something, and then you meet someone who makes you realize you're barely a beginner. That's what it felt like to be a spacefaring civilization that suddenly discovered they'd been playing in the shallow end of the galactic pool. Tell Dr. Peterson we'd be honored to see the demonstration, Olivia replied. And Emma, thank him for volunteering to help with the mining crew's health screenings. I know he didn't have to do that. Emma nodded and headed off, her steps light with the kind of enthusiasm that came from working with people who genuinely cared about making life better for everyone around them. It was remarkable how quickly fear could transform into friendship when people actually took the time to understand each other. A familiar voice spoke from behind her. Watching the kids play never gets old, does it? Olivia turned to find Admiral Noah Williams approaching, and she was struck once again by how different he looked compared to that first terrifying encounter. Instead of the full combat armor that had made him seem like a walking weapons platform, he wore only light-duty gear still, obviously military, but approachable, human even. 6 months of working together had taught both species that first impressions could be devastatingly wrong. The humans who'd seemed like ruthless conquerors were actually overprotective guardians who worried constantly about the safety and well-being of everyone under their care, and her people, who the humans had initially seen as helpless civilians, had proven to be remarkably adaptable and innovative when given access to better tools and training. It really doesn't, she agreed, gesturing toward the recreational area where human children were teaching her young miners. A game that involved floating magnetic balls and a lot of laughter. 6 months ago, I thought the most dangerous thing in my universe was a malfunctioning plasma drill. Now I'm watching kids from 2 different species invent new games together. Williams joined her at the observation window, his expression thoughtful. Any regrets about that distress call? He asked, and when he smiled, Olivia was struck by how the expression had evolved from something that once terrified her into something genuinely warm and reassuring. Every single day, she replied honestly, but also, not at all. It was a complicated feeling, looking back on the moment that had changed everything. The terror of that first encounter, the crushing realization that her people were not alone in the universe, the overwhelming discovery that they were possibly the least prepared species for galactic citizenship imaginable, but also the wonder of new friendships, the excitement of technological advancement, and the profound security that came from knowing they were no longer defenseless against the dangers of space. The universe is much more dangerous than we knew, she continued, watching as a human security patrol moved through the station's corridors. Their presence both comforting and sobering, more violent, more hostile than we ever imagined, but also, she gestured toward, the mixed groups of humans and her people working together, more wonderful than we ever dreamed possible. Williams nodded, following her gaze. You know, we'd been monitoring galactic communications for decades before your distress call. Just listening, learning, trying to figure out if there was anyone out there we could talk to without immediately starting a war. The admission surprised her. You were spying on us. Not spying, he corrected gently. More like, cautious observation. We always wondered if we'd be too scary, too different, too aggressive for anyone else in the galaxy. Our history isn't exactly filled with peaceful first contacts between different cultures. Olivia thought about what she'd learned of human history over the past 6 months. The endless cycles of conflict and cooperation, the way they'd turned every challenge into a reason to become stronger, the countless times they'd pulled together in the face of extinction-level threats. It was a story written in blood and determination, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. And now? She asked. Williams smiled again, and this time Olivia didn't find it frightening at all. There was something deeply comforting about being smiled at by someone who commanded enough firepower to reshape solar systems, especially when that smile was directed at you with genuine affection. Now we know that sometimes the best friendships are forged in the fires of misunderstanding, he said. Sometimes you have to scare the hell out of each other before you can figure out how to trust. Above them, visible through the reinforced viewports, the ships of Earth's 5th battle fleet maintained their eternal patrol. 37 massive warships that had once seemed like harbingers of destruction now felt like the most reassuring sight in the galaxy. They were no longer an invasion force, they were guardians, protectors, friends with very big guns who took their responsibilities seriously. The transformation was remarkable when Olivia really thought about it. These humans, these self-described Deathworlders from a planet that sounded like a cosmic torture chamber, had become the most caring, protective allies her people could have asked for. They'd shared their technology, their knowledge, their culture, and most importantly, their absolute commitment to keeping their new friends safe. Admiral, she said quietly, what happens now? I mean, long term. We can't stay under your protection forever. Williams was quiet for a moment, watching as a human engineer showed one of her people how to operate some piece of equipment that probably costs more than her entire original station. Captain, he said finally, protection isn't something you graduate from. It's something family does for each other, for as long as necessary. The word family hit her with unexpected force. That's what this had become, wasn't it? Not an alliance, or a treaty, or a diplomatic arrangement, but something deeper. Something that transcended species and star systems and all the vast distances between worlds. Looking out at the bustling activity of Sanctuary Base, at the humans and her people working together to build something better than either could have achieved alone, Olivia realized that her accidental distress call had accomplished something remarkable. It had brought them home. The Deathworlders had come in peace, even if they'd brought enough firepower to enforce it across half the galaxy. And in doing so, they'd given her people something they'd never known they were missing: a family worth protecting, and protectors worth trusting. As she watched a human child teach one of her young miners how to throw a ball in zero gravity, Olivia smiled and whispered a quiet thank you to whatever cosmic force had caused her mining equipment to explode at exactly the right moment. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst possible mistakes. The end.